Hey guys, GWS here. I'm just going to take this political test here just for fun, the 8 values political test. As you can see, you have 8 values. A lot of them are pitted against each other, so let me just go over that briefly. Of course, you got equality versus markets, nation versus world, which is globalism, um, liberty versus authority, libertarian versus authoritarian, and tradition versus progress. So that's progressives versus basically conservatives or classical conservatives, I guess. Okay, so you will be presented with a series of statements. Got it. I've already taken this once, but we're going to take it again because I like to take tests like this twice just to see, like, because you get into different moods where maybe you'll strongly agree, maybe you'll agree with something, or maybe you'll be neutral, and maybe you'll think about the question more as you um, go on. So let's go ahead and say opposition by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Not really. I mean, there's a point where corporations can be too oppressive as a whole. You've seen that before, where yeah, you do got to put your foot down sometimes, but that's kind of rare. So we'll just regular disagree. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Mm, a little bit. I mean, you can go too far with it, and I think we have gone too far with it. Um, in terms of the American political spectrum, I would disagree, but in terms of the general principle of the government providing basic protections, I would agree. The freer the market, the freer the people. That is just a fact. Strongly agree. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. It's kind of better to do both, really. Um, to ensure welfare for all citizens. Like, I mean, you can run at a small deficit because if your economy is growing, and you're running at a small deficit, then you can be running essentially neutral because economic growth is going to negate any kind of uncertainty about the debt that companies may have that the US may not be able to pay it off. So I'd say neutral because there's a lot of nuance and it's too general of a question. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. Publicly funded research is a big waste. And yes, market-based research can be inefficient in terms of big picture, but the waste in government is just overpowers any kind of publicly funded research. And plus, with the market, there's always some kind of use for that research, if anything, just for one company. Um, the problem I have is really it goes back to the broader issue of copyright, intellectual property in general. And that's where I think the market fails because the government's protecting intellectual property. Intellectual property should just be free for all. Like, if you have knowledge about certain procedures to do something, you should be able to do that, and companies should not be protected in that. But in general, I disagree because I don't think it's efficient. International trade is beneficial. It depends. Generally, it is because I think I'm going to slightly agree just because it's beneficial if you need it, or if you are getting a good deal out of it. And I think all things fair, it is a net positive, so I'll agree with that. Nope, communism. Sorry, not knowing that. It would be best the social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. This is basically a value-based question. If private charity could replace all social programs and provide 100% security, absolutely. But then again, you also have to weigh in, is this possible? And while I believe charity is more effective at getting money to the people who need it, I also believe that there is a certain level of security that's required, because you are always going to miss somebody and they're always going to fall through the cracks, and they have to have a stable way of getting something that ensures a basic standard of living. In favor of private charity, I'm going to say neutral again, because it's just, it's a really huge nuanced point. You really just, that question is incredibly nuanced. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. Wealth redistribution in itself is very ineffective, and this says increased, so we're going to disagree with that, because that is not a good way to provide money to the poor to raise taxes. The best way would be to cut spending, because when you raise taxes, you don't know what effect you're going to get. You could get a revenue increase that allows you to redistribute that wealth, but you can also create an incentive structure where companies are either not going to produce as much taxable income, or where they're going to send that money overseas or do business overseas at a higher rate, and therefore produce less taxable income that way. So it's not a good, I'm even going to strongly disagree, because it's just not a good regime. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. In terms of legal, yeah. In terms of, like, do you deserve that money? If somebody gave it to you, then yeah, you deserve it. Public utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. I don't think there's any other regime other than that would be good. Now, it doesn't mean that they are good things when they're owned by the government. You look at the state of our roads and utilities. We can't provide clean water to people, and you look at the state of roads in places like where I'm from, northern Ohio. They don't keep up with those roads. It's insanely, disgustingly expensive, and these contractors are making bank off the government, and the government won't bargain with them. But do we have a better system? Like, would giving these to private companies be better? I don't think we have the economic infrastructure to support such a thing, because you're going to get a lot of, you may even get increased costs for a while before they eventually go down. So I'm just going to generally agree. Excessive government interference is a threat to the economy. Absolutely. Without a question. Because every interference the government does, whether it's through tax regulation or wage laws, all this stuff, that costs money. That's not free. You're talking about trillions of dollars lost to the economy in the United States. So anytime you put a regulation or any of that in, that's what you're doing. You are taking directly away from the economy, and you are replacing it with a less efficient regime in the government. Those with greater ability to pay should receive better health care. And this is the should problem because it's a moral values question. Should receive better health care. It's the whole problem is this insinuation that what you get is based on morality. Like, money is not a moral thing. The economy is not a moral thing. So, should they? No, like, I want the poorest person to receive the best health care. But should the government intervene? It's not effective. I'm gonna say neutral because I just don't like the wording of the question. It's not, because it's not about morality. Quality of education is a right of all people. Now that is strongly disagree because you don't have the right to a quality education. That's not a right. You have the right to emergency care, food, clothing, and shelter. That's it. That's where your rights end. Anything else is a privilege that you need to either earn or you need to obtain by some other means than the taxpayers. Taxpayers do not owe you money for an education. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. No, because somebody has to create that company, take the risk, do all the assets, and the workers, yeah, they deserve healthy compensation for their contribution. But should they own the company that somebody else created? No. Excuse me. The United Nations should be abolished. No. Now, does it need to be changed? Yeah, it needs to be changed to reflect the modern world without the USSR, without it. It just needs to reflect the modern world is what it needs to do. And it also needs to stop with the politics, because you're getting a lot of anti-Israel stuff, and that's just horrible. And so it doesn't need to be abolished, but it needs to be changed. So I just disagree with that. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. Not often. There are times when you need to protect interests, when you need to flex muscle, when you need to be hawkish. But based on the amount that we do it, it's ridiculous. We don't need to be in Syria. We don't need to be in Iraq or Afghanistan. We don't need to be in these places because we're not protecting our country by doing so. These people who come over from and do terrorist attacks, they come with nothing other than ambition to take their own lives to kill someone. You're not going to stop them by killing a bunch of desert-dwelling camel riders. It's not going to work. So, often, no. I support regional unions such as the European Union. I think they undermine the UN, so no, I don't. We have NATO. NATO was created for a specific purpose. The European Union is definitely, I guess it's good for them to have an economic union, but the lengths they're going for that is just too extreme. In general, I don't support regional unions unless they're for a specific purpose, so I'm going to generally disagree. It's important to maintain our national sovereignty, yes. No other country has a right to dictate to us because we have a constitution, and that's what we follow here. A united world government, nope. I'm not doing that. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than it is to further our strength. Definitely. Excuse me. To further our strength, yes, I'd strongly agree, except for, well, I don't know, because you kind of want to do both, because you want to further our strength. I'm going to say neutral because, yeah, it's important to retain peaceful relations, but at the cost of furthering our strength or as a higher priority, I think you want to do both. So I'm just going to do neutral. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. Wrong. I mean, well, the reason I don't strongly disagree with that is because there are times where you should not have to get another country's permission to go to war, because sometimes you have to go to war for an interest that is in nobody's interest other than yours, and it could be a national security issue. There are rare times when that could be the case, where you don't have to justify to another. That doesn't mean you don't state your reasons for going to war. What it means is you don't have to get their permission. Military spending is a waste of money. Not really. There's a lot of waste in the military, but it's not really a waste of money. International aid is a waste of money. It depends on the aid. I'm going to go neutral because some aid's a waste, some aid is like people really need it. And if we have the stuff to give, then why not give a little bit? So it just depends on the circumstances. My nation is great. I believe you should have some inherent love for the country you're from. Not necessarily because you agree with everything it does, but because you want to make it better, and you want to defend your values against other countries. It's, people think that just because you're patriotic, that it means that you have to agree with everything by definition, no matter what. You are good by definition, no matter what. No, that's not the point. The point is, you live here, you're from here. All your neighbors, all your family, friends are probably from here, most of them anyhow. And you want your country's values to be the best, and that's the important thing. So yeah, you do want to have some excuse me, that can go overboard, but yeah. Research should be conducted on an international scale. Why not? Because, like, you put your heads together and it's better that way. I'm sure there can be some abuses to it, and yeah, it needs to be effective, but as a principle, absolutely we should corroborate on an international level. Government should be accountable to the international community, absolutely. Not at the expense of sovereignty, though. But yeah, the international community should denounce, should be able to sanction countries, including the United States, that violates international laws. And this needs to be applied impartially. That is, when you do it to Israel, you do it to Palestine, you do it to Iraq, you do it to Jordan, you do it to Saudi Arabia, you do it to Qatar, you do it to all these countries. So yeah, most of the time, that's true. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Agree with exceptions, of course. Now, if the authoritarian government is, and if it's a democratic government and you can vote the guy out, no, you can't be violent, because you have your process in place. If it's authoritarian dictatorship government that is murdering people, then yeah, violence. So I generally agree violence is not acceptable except for in extreme circumstances, and you better be prepared to give with blood. That's basically all I'm going to say with that. And at least at first, because see, the United States went through this too with the revolution, and at first in the revolution nobody took us seriously, but as we spilled our blood, and we were taking the fight to the British, we weren't winning the war, but we were taking the fight to them. We were competitive with them, the greatest military in the world, and we were toe to toe. That shows other countries that, yeah, we're serious, we are going to fight, and we believe that we are a nation, and we are willing to die for that idea. And then you get the French involved, then you get the Russians involved, and that's how you create a nation. But in general, no, you should not be violent if you have the process in place, and most countries do. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. Well, my religious values are Christianity, and you look at the values of Christianity: generosity, loving family values, traditional values. Yeah, I generally agree that there's some Christian values I don't like, but I think if you look at what religious values do to a country, you look at the South versus the North in terms of giving. Chronicles of Philanthropy. I could pull it up right here, but I'm lazy, so I'm not going to do it. You look at that, though. Chronicles of Philanthropy. Google it. How America Gives. And you'll see a difference between what Southerners give and what Northerners give. And to me, that says everything. So, yes, definitely. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. Yeah. For reasons I've already stated multiple times. It is very important to maintain law and order. Yeah. But not to a fault. The general populace makes poor decisions. No. In general, they make good decisions. In general, the population can make dumb decisions, and they do, especially about their health care, their health. But another problem with this is the labeling of poor decisions. What's a poor decision? Like, is a poor decision for somebody's health actually a poor decision when they are putting a stronger weight on the present than the future? Because some people just do that. They don't care. They're like, yeah, this is bad for me. I don't care. It tastes good, so I'm going to eat it. And so you get, like, it's a very poor dichotomy. What it is I'm going to generally disagree, because I think people make good decisions for themselves, and that's the ultimate thing. Are people making the decisions they want to make? Victimless crimes such as drug use should not be crimes at all. Yeah, definitely, without a question. If you have not harmed anybody, you have not committed a crime. That is just period. Includes drugs, includes anything. Suicide. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from the acts of terrorism. No, I don't agree with that, because terrorism... Now, you should protect against terrorism, but there are means to protect against terrorism other than taking away civil liberties. To me, that's just off the table. Your freedoms are more important than the small percentage of people who die from terrorism. It's... the amount of terrorism is going up, but there are many things you can do to quell that, and getting rid of civil liberties, not one of them. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. I'm not going to fully strongly disagree, but it's Most of the time, not necessary. You do need stuff like body cams, and you need basic, like, government buildings, I guess. There are exceptions where surveillance is positive, where it's to hold the government accountable. But in terms of like this mass NSA surveillance or any kind of mass surveillance of the people, no. Usually it's not necessary. The very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty. Yeah, I'm going to disagree because it's like you can counteract the state, and our founding fathers have proved that. They proved that by creating a constitution which has endured for 250 years almost, and it's proven that we can at least fight the losing fight of the government taking away our liberties. Like, we can at least struggle to slow it down as much as we can. But yes, the very existence of the state is always going to tend toward authoritarian rule. Always, because people in power, I don't care if it's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, John McCain, I don't care who it is, Maxine Waters, it's the state is always going to tend to be more regulatory, more authoritarian, more controlling. And a lot of that is also because people are going to demand more from the state, as the state pretends to be a progenitor of good values. And it's just basically, yeah, no authority should be left unquestioned. I see there is a point where, yeah, you can't endlessly question every authority, but I'm gonna agree, because unquestioned, no authority should be left completely unquestioned. There has to be some kind of transparency toward that authority, but there is also the authority aspect. That is, you cannot, ultimately, if you disobey an authority too much, then yeah, you should be put in prison. And yeah, there are times where they have to get physical and they have to use force, ultimately. But should they be left completely unquestioned? No. A hierarchical state is best, and I can't pronounce things right now. And this question is just incorrect, because it's not about if it's best or worst, it's about what is ultimately going to happen. Hierarchies are how humanity operates as a whole, and that is always how the state is going to operate. You're always going to have leaders and followers. You're always this idea that you're just going to have everybody just full democracy is wrong. Not even Athens had that. Athens, yeah, they had a democracy, but they also had leaders. They had people who would get more stump time. They had people who would basically run things. And so, yeah, you are always going to have hierarchies. And so, as best, I'm just gonna leave it neutral, because it's a nonsense statement. How many we got? Oh, we're 39. It is important that government follows the majority opinion even if it's wrong. That is called mob rule. And now, I don't know, I might put this neutral, because even if it is wrong, it depends how wrong, and it depends what way it's wrong. And again, you are getting into definitions of right and wrong that could be hairy. Like, who defines what is right? Who defines what is wrong? Should the government define that? And I think it depends on the circumstance. I don't think you can weight it toward the people or the government when it's close. I'd say in general, I'd kind of agree, just because it's, I wish they had a slightly agree option, because I don't want to commit to agreeing. I'm going to put neutral because it does. But, it would be slightly agree if they had the option. The stronger the leadership, the better. Yeah. Yeah, that's true, because ultimately you want to be pointed in a right direction, and you can only get that with leadership. Without leadership, what do you get? You get political squabbling, gridlock, etc. And yeah, gridlock in some ways is important. Then again, you can also get bad leadership. But I'd say good, effective leadership has a more positive impact than bad, effective leadership, because bad, effective leadership can at least have opposition if it goes against the people as a whole. So I generally agree, you have to be a strong leader. Because if your values are good but your leadership sucks, you can run this country into the dirt. So that kind of takes the question away from the neutral. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. And again, the definition of democracy is just government by the people as a whole, like where the decisions are made by the population as a whole. So by definition, yeah, it's a decision-making process. Now there's components to that decision-making process, but no, democracy is about making decisions. It's not about activism. It's not about, I mean, you can do that as a component, but ultimately it's about what decisions you make. So no, environmental regulations are essential to a point. Depends on what regulations, but in general they are essential. Like, it's one thing if you're polluting your own pond in your backyard, but it's another thing if you're polluting a river or a lake. And yeah, environmental regulations can and do go overboard, and we need to reduce those regulations. But the fact that those regulations exist is not negotiable. They have to exist, because you can't pollute somebody else's water, their drinking water or anything. It goes back to, like, I believe it was the Euphrates with the Sumerians. Like, you had the cities upriver who were prosperous, and the cities downriver who got sick and got plagues. Why? Because the cities upriver would dump their garbage, their feces, what have you, in the river, and as you go down the river, you get more and more cities along the Euphrates. They dump more stuff into it, and all the people downriver, they gotta, the further downriver you are, the more awful your water is. And so you have people who succeed and fail based on how far upriver they are, and that's not a good situation. So a better world will come from automation, science, and technology. Yeah. Number one, it's going to happen. You're not going to stop it. Number two, there's no time in history where a reduction in human labor requirements has not improved our standard of living. Because yeah, you're gonna automate workers out of the market, but on the other hand, you're going to also make production cheaper. And if any of impact on wages will be counteracted by an impact in cost of living. Cost of living always follows the income of the lowest people. That's just the way economics works. If you look at cost of living, say in India, it's extremely cheap. Why? Because people don't earn much money and companies have to sell to them. You know, if you're growing in excess of any crop, you know, you have to sell your crop. Otherwise it's going to rot. A lot of people don't have the option of exporting their agricultural goods. So they got to sell local, and you got to get what you can get for it. And so, yeah, strongly agree. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. Traditional values, yes. Religious values, it depends. It depends how far you go. In terms of the values, yes. I mean, should we literally be teaching the Bible in school? Probably not. Except for, I'd say, as a historical document, you could teach it. But there are a lot of people who don't believe in the Bible, and there are a lot of atheists. And you know, you do have to respect them. You have to respect them. You cannot force them into a religious class. That is unethical, and that's against our Constitution in general, and as a general principle, period. You know, people need to be made aware of God, but ultimately they need to make their own decisions, and you can't force that upon them in any way. So generally I agree, but not with direct biblical teaching. Traditions are of no value on their own. That's generally true. There is some value to tradition because it works, but like, it's been proven to, traditions like family values, like traditional husband, wife, male husband, female wife, plus house, generally works. And it works extremely well. It produces a very strong workforce. So but is that a value in itself? No, but there is value of doing what works. You know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Religion should play a role in government. Again, this depends whether you're talking about religious values or religious literalism. Like, values, yes. The general idea of God, yes. But should we be making laws based on it? No. I'm going to say neutral because it depends on specifically what's being talked about, and that's not in this scope. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed? No, because churches are non-profits. You know, if you're going to do that with churches, then you need to start taxing non-profits. And no, non-profits should not be taxed. Now we need to rework the non-profit system so that it's not abused, because it often is abused. Like, non-profits taking, quote, excess revenue, like Planned Parenthood, of billions of dollars, and that's not a non-profit. I'm sorry. There needs to be, it needs to have a hard dollar cap, is what it needs to have, in addition to a percentage income cap, and there needs to be limitations, but no, they should not be church. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our life. No. I'm sure you guys can fill in the blanks in my argument there. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. No, we have bigger fish to fry. Society was better many years ago than it is now. I kind of agree in ways. there was a lot of bad things that we did, but there's a lot of bad things we do today. We're not better than we were before. I'd say in terms of the nuance, like in the United States, the nuance that went into voting decisions, the lack of partisanship, in general the structure of society based on charity, less government intervention in our lives, and just a more caring atmosphere, saying that there were people left behind. You know, this didn't extend to everybody, and there were ghettos back then, but if you look at the 1950s and how people lived versus now, there's a lot more people in ghettos now than there were back then, even among the black community, I'm pretty sure. Because if you were poor back then, you probably still had basic enjoyments. I mean, you didn't have the insane violence. Like, I think in the 1960s is when our crime rates were at some of our lowest points. So generally I'd agree, but there's a lot of exceptions to that. There's a lot of cons with the pros, and there's not that many more pros, but there, I think if you were to put down a list of things that were better and things that were worse in the United States, at least, which is what I know about, then it generally would. Now, for the world, probably would be disagree, because the standard of living for the world has increased since the 1950s, 1960s. But, geez, let me get something to drink. There we go. Much better. Now should be less throat clearing to blow your eardrums. Okay. It is important we maintain traditions of our past. Yeah. It is important that we think in the long term beyond our lifespans. Not really, because things change. You can't predict the future. You know, you can't even predict how the trend of the country is going to go in 10 years' time. How are you going to predict beyond our lifespans? Now, granted, there are certain things like, okay, if climate change were a problem, let's just suppose that, yeah, you have to do things you have to plan in the very long term for that, because it's a very long term kind of trend. But for 99% of things, no. I'd say 10-year projections and nothing more than that. So disagree. Reason it is more important than maintaining our culture, I'd say, yeah, because if your culture is unreasonable, then what's the point of maintaining it? Like, yeah. Drug use should be legalized or decriminalized, of course. Same-sex marriage should be legal. Government recognition of all forms of marriage needs to go away. So I'm going to disagree based on that point. Not strongly disagree, because this isn't about gay marriage. Because the fact is that marriage was subsidized by the government to create more of your typical family, where you would have the thing I said before, male husband, female wife, children plus house equals very strong foundation for the country. And that was the whole point of marriage. And, you know, like if you're a gay couple, you can't have children with each other. You have to get them from somewhere else. You either have to have a surrogate, artificial insemination, you know, you have to do something else, and none of which is um, normal for the traditional family. But saying that, that idea has failed miserably. We haven't encouraged anything like that. All we're doing is we're just giving tax breaks for nothing. Because there's no tax benefit to marriage. And so I'd say, I'll just put it like this. If the state is going to support marriage, absolutely, same-sex marriage should be legal. But in saying that, if the state is going to support same-sex marriage, then it should abolish marriage altogether, because that just proves that the whole thing is meaningless. So I'm going to disagree. No cultures are superior to others. Generally agree. Because how do you define superior? Like, all cultures are guilty of wrongdoing. I don't care if it's American, European, Asian, Black, Middle Eastern, doesn't matter. We're all guilty. I'm even probably going to strongly disagree with this, because I strongly agree with this, because no, there is not a single culture that can claim to be superior to any other culture. The only superiority there could be is economic superiority and power superiority. But we're talking about the values of a culture. And I'm going to agree because there are extreme cultures where you'd really have a hard case arguing that they're superior based on such extreme measures like child sacrifice, all that. But in general, no. No culture's superior, but there are standards to that, in my opinion. Sex outside marriage is immoral. No, because marriage itself has just become so meaningless. I don't think marriage means anything anymore. And it certainly doesn't mean what God intended it to mean anymore. So, you know, I'd say no. No, I don't strongly disagree with that, because you do have to have some standard. You know, you just can't go screwing around with people. You have to have a legitimate love and care before sex is moral. But the specific question of marriage, no. If we accept migrants at all, it's important that they assimilate to our culture. Absolutely. And I say that just saying that all cultures are, no culture superior. So isn't that a contradiction? No, because assimilation is about, you want to fit into the society that you are in. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And that is what they need to follow to a point. Now, there are some aspects to their culture that they should share. Absolutely. And in a sense, the United States is just a combination of many different cultures. A melting pot, as we used to call it. But there needs to be some level of assimilation, i.e., English should be the official language of the United States. If you come here, speak English. That doesn't mean you can't speak any other languages in addition to English. Absolutely. And it does not mean we should not learn other languages. Yeah, we should be learning other languages. But should they speak English? Should they be required? Yeah. Because that's a part of working to be accepted in the place that you're going. When you're a guest in somebody else's house, you know, most people, they're super careful. They don't want to be offensive. They want to be pleasant, and they want to be comfortable to be around. They don't want to cause a ruckus within any place they're going, because it's just, you want to have respect when somebody lets you into their place. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases, yeah, except for when the life of the mother is in conflict. I think that the tie goes to the mother, because she is 100% going to be able to contribute something to others. And I say that with this, though. You know, if you value the life of the mother, and you determine that the child is almost certainly going to die with what you have to do to save the mother, then you need to take everything into account, respecting the child. You don't just kill the kid because there's like a 5% chance the mother's gonna die. You do everything in your power to save that child that you're also doing to save the mother, because that is a human being in there. Period. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. No. Just no. Because prohibiting guns is like prohibiting drugs. You're never going to win that war. I support single payer. Nope. Prostitution should be illegal. Nope. Maintaining family values is essential. Absolutely. Because that's, family values is the strongest foundation you can have. Absolutely. And there's no downside to that. To chase progress at all costs is dangerous. Yeah, progress for progress' sake is, this says all costs. I guess I'm gonna agree, even though the wording, all costs, because progress for progress' sake is just like conservatism for conservatism's sake. You have to have a reason, and you should not just progress for the sake of change. That is extremely dangerous. Genetic modification is a force of good even for humans. It's not a moral question. Another one of these, and there's a few too many of these, to be honest. It's, you know, it's not a force of good, it's just a force. Like, it's one of those things that's going to happen. It can be for good or it can be for evil. It is morally neutral. So no. We should open up our borders to immigration. No. Government should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. No. No, because foreign citizens have no right to be here. We need to be concerned about our people first. That doesn't mean no concern about foreign citizens, but it means, I'm going to go back, I'm going to just regularly disagree with that, because you do want to have some concern with foreign citizens. But in general, you should focus on your own people more. All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Yeah, they should. You know, you treat everybody with love, kindness, and respect, regardless. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Depends on, like my group, what does that mean? Like race? Does it mean country? It's a meaningless question. You know, I don't know. It says group in general, so it's not referring to a specific thing, and they've already given the country. I'm gonna disagree, because it's, people should have their own goals. You know, I'm not gonna tell people to accept my goals or my values. So no. Okay, so here's my results. Economic access market 31 to 68.9. 69, we'll say. markets, of course, that's no surprise. Um, Nationalism, globalism, 59-41. It was a little bit higher patriotism before, but I don't know, I guess I thought about things a little bit more. Um, and that would probably be reflective. I'd say I'm a little bit more patriotic, but then again, I also see the value in working with others. Civil access moderate, 54.645. That's a very good balance. That's about where I rank on the other scale too. That's on my avatar. And societal access, 58.6 to 41.4. Exactly, because progressive values, progressive values could be good. They're just not. And same thing as before, moderate conservatism. And there is my test. Anyhow, thanks for listening, guys. God bless, and hope you got some perspective on where I stand.